Ryan Carter was having one of those days where nothing seemed to go right. It started with spilling coffee on his favorite shirt, continued with missing the bus, and ended with getting stuck behind slow walkers on the way into the office. By the time he arrived at Innovatech Solutions, a bustling tech company located in downtown Chicago, Ryan's mood had soured considerably. He muttered under his breath as he walked through the revolving doors, nodding curtly at the receptionist without making eye contact. Innovatech Solutions was known for its cutting-edge technology and competitive work environment. The office itself was impressive. A sprawling space filled with glass walls, open-plan workstations, and high-tech gadgets everywhere you looked. Despite all this, Ryan didn't feel particularly inspired. To him, it was just another day at a job that paid well, but demanded too much from people like him. People who, in his opinion, were smarter than everyone else but never got enough credit for it. After grabbing a quick sandwich from the cafeteria, Ryan headed back toward his desk. That's when he noticed him, a tall, broad-shouldered man standing near the reception area. The man wore a sharp navy blue suit, polished shoes, and carried himself with an air of quiet authority. His skin was dark, and his expression was unreadable as he glanced around the room. Something about him made Ryan uneasy, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. Who's this guy? Ryan thought irritably. Doesn't look like he belongs here. Without thinking twice, Ryan approached the stranger. Up close, the man looked even more imposing. His posture was relaxed, but there was something commanding about the way he held himself. For reasons Ryan couldn't explain, it annoyed him. You lost or something? Ryan asked gruffly, crossing his arms over his chest. His tone was dismissive, almost mocking. The man turned to face him, his eyebrows raising slightly. Excuse me, I said. Are you lost? You don't have an ID badge. Ryan gestured vaguely toward the man's chest, as if expecting to see one dangling there. When he didn't, Ryan smirked. Only employees wear badges around here. The man studied Ryan for a moment, his gaze steady and unwavering. Then, with a small smile, he replied, I'm waiting for someone. I'll be fine. His voice was smooth, calm, and carried a hint of amusement, as if he found Ryan's attitude amusing rather than offensive. But Ryan wasn't amused. If anything, the man's composure only irritated him further. Well, maybe you should wait outside, Ryan snapped. This is a professional workplace, not some hangout spot. The words came out harsher than he intended, but Ryan didn't care. People like this, people who didn't fit the mold, who didn't belong in places like Innovatech, always rubbed him the wrong way. In his mind, they were taking up space meant for others, for people who actually deserved to be there. To Ryan's surprise, the man didn't react angrily. Instead, he chuckled softly, shaking his head. You'd be surprised how often I hear that, he said, his tone light but firm. But don't worry, I won't stay long. I'm meeting with senior management. Senior management? Ryan snorted loudly, earning a few curious glances from nearby coworkers. Yeah, sure you are, he said sarcastically. What's next? Are you going to tell me you're the new CEO? For a split second, the man's lips twitched as if he wanted to laugh again, but then his expression hardened ever so slightly, and he straightened up, towering over Ryan. Actually, he said evenly, I am. Ryan blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. Wait, what? Before the man could respond, a young woman approached them, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. She looked frazzled but professional, clutching a clipboard to her chest. Mr. Johnson, she exclaimed, relief washing over her face. We've been looking for you. The conference room is ready. Mr. Johnson. Ryan's stomach dropped as realization dawned on him. This wasn't just some random visitor. This was Marcus Johnson, the rumored new CEO of Innovatech Solutions. Rumors had been swirling for weeks about who would take over the top position after the previous CEO retired. Unexpectedly, some speculated it would be someone internal, while others believed it would be an outsider brought in to shake things up. Either way, no one knew much about him except that he was young, successful, and determined to make changes. And now, here, he was, in the flesh, and Ryan had just insulted him. Marcus gave Ryan one last measured look before turning to follow the woman. As he walked away, Ryan stood frozen, his mouth hanging open like a fish out of water. Around him, the office buzzed with activity, oblivious to the awkward exchange that had just taken place. Employees chatted casually, typed furiously on their keyboards, and sipped coffee as if nothing unusual had happened. But Ryan felt like the entire world had shifted beneath his feet. How could he have been so stupid, so careless? He prided himself on being observant, on knowing exactly what kind of person someone was within seconds of meeting them. Yet somehow he'd completely misjudged Marcus Johnson. As the initial shock began to wear off, anger bubbled up inside Ryan. Anger at himself for making such a colossal mistake, yes, but also anger at Marcus for being so damn calm about it. Why hadn't he called Ryan out immediately? Why hadn't he yelled or demanded an apology? Instead, he'd handled the situation with grace and dignity, leaving Ryan feeling small and insignificant. By the time Ryan returned to his desk, his hands were trembling slightly. He tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept replaying the encounter over and over again. What would happen now? Would Marcus fire him on the spot? Or worse, would he make an example of Ryan in front of the entire company? Lisa, Ryan's co-worker and occasional lunch buddy, noticed his agitation. She leaned over her cubicle wall, concern etched across her face. "Hey, you okay?" she asked gently. "You seem off." Ryan hesitated, debating whether to confide in her. Lisa was nice enough, but she wasn't exactly known for keeping secrets. Still, he needed to vent to someone. "I think I just insulted the new CEO," he admitted quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Lisa's eyes widened in disbelief. "Wait, what? How?" Ryan groaned, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I thought he was a delivery guy or something. I told him he didn't belong here." "Oh my God," Lisa murmured, covering her mouth with her hand. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Ryan muttered bitterly. He didn't say anything about it, though, just smiled and walked away like it was no big deal. Lisa frowned, unsure of what to say. On one hand, she felt bad for Ryan. He clearly hadn't meant to offend anyone. On the other hand, his assumptions about people based on appearances were problematic, to say the least. Still, she decided to offer some reassurance. "Maybe he won't hold it against you," she suggested cautiously. "I mean, he seems pretty level-headed." Ryan scoffed. "Yeah, right. Level-headed CEOs don't exist. Trust me, I've worked with enough of them to know." Despite his bravado, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing, and as the hours ticked by, anticipation hung heavy in the air, casting a shadow over what should have been a normal workday. Little did Ryan know, this was only the beginning of a chain of events that would change everything, for better or worse. The rest of the day dragged on for Ryan Carter like molasses in winter. Every email notification, every phone call, and every casual chat with coworkers felt like a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. He couldn't shake the image of Marcus Johnson walking away from him earlier, calm and composed as if nothing had happened. Ryan replayed their conversation over and over in his head, cringing at how foolish he'd sounded. By late afternoon, an announcement popped up on everyone's computer screens. Mandatory town hall meeting, 3 p.m. No further details were provided, but rumors spread faster than wildfire through the office. Whispers echoed in hallways and hushed tones filled break rooms. Everyone wanted to know one thing. Was this meeting about the new CEO? Ryan tried to act normal, pretending not to care, but inside his stomach churned. He knew deep down that this meeting was going to be about Marcus Johnson, and if it was, there was a good chance Ryan's blunder would come back to haunt him. As much as he hated to admit it, he was scared. At exactly 3 o'clock, employees filed into the auditorium, a sleek, high-tech space with tiered seating and a giant projector screen behind the stage. The room buzzed with excitement and curiosity. Some people chatted animatedly, speculating about what the new CEO might say. Others sat quietly, scrolling through their phones or jotting notes. Ryan found a seat near the middle of the room, hoping to blend into the crowd. But no matter where he sat, he couldn't escape the knot of dread tightening in his chest. When Marcus Johnson finally stepped onto the stage, the room erupted into applause. Clad in a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, he exuded confidence and authority. His presence commanded attention, and even those who weren't paying close attention before sat up straighter in their seats. Ryan watched in stunned silence as Marcus approached the podium, his movements smooth and deliberate. "Good afternoon, everyone," Marcus began, his voice warm yet commanding. "I want to start by saying how honored I am to join Innovatech Solutions as your new CEO. This company has a rich history of innovation, and I'm thrilled to be part of its future." The crowd responded with enthusiastic clapping, but Ryan barely noticed. All he could focus on was the man standing center stage, the same man he'd insulted just hours earlier. Each word Marcus spoke seemed to echo louder in Ryan's ears, amplifying his growing sense of unease. Marcus went on to talk about his vision for the company. He emphasized the importance of teamwork, creativity, and inclusivity. "Innovation thrives when we embrace diversity," he said firmly. "Different perspectives lead to better solutions, and I believe that fostering a culture of respect and collaboration will take us to new heights." As he spoke, Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Those words, respect, collaboration, inclusivity, felt like veiled accusations aimed directly at him. Was Marcus deliberately calling him out without naming names? Or was Ryan just being paranoid? Either way, he couldn't help but feel like all eyes were on him, judging him silently. Toward the end of his speech, Marcus opened the floor for questions. Several hands shot up immediately, and Marcus called on various employees answering their queries with patience and clarity. Most of the questions revolved around upcoming projects, company policies, and leadership strategies. But then, Ryan did something impulsive. He raised his hand. For a moment, he regretted it. What was he thinking? He should have kept his mouth shut and let the meeting end peacefully. But something inside him, a mix of anger, embarrassment, and defiance, pushed him to speak up. When Marcus acknowledged him, Ryan stood reluctantly, clutching the armrest of his chair for support. "I have a question," Ryan said, his voice louder than necessary. "You keep talking about inclusivity and diversity, but isn't it possible that focusing too much on these things could distract us from our real goals? Shouldn't performance and results be the priority?" The room fell silent. Even the air seemed to grow heavier. Ryan glanced around nervously, noticing the disapproving look some of his co-workers gave him. Lisa, seated a few rows ahead, turned slightly to shoot him a warning glare, shaking her head almost imperceptibly. Marcus didn't react immediately. He simply stared at Ryan, his expression unreadable. For a brief moment, Ryan thought he saw a flicker of recognition in Marcus's eyes, as if he remembered their earlier encounter, but it vanished quickly. "That's a valid concern," Marcus replied after a pause, his tone measured but firm. "Performance and results are absolutely critical. However, they don't exist in isolation. A workplace where everyone feels valued and respected naturally fosters higher productivity and better outcomes. It's not about choosing one over the other, it's about creating a balance." Ryan bristled at the response. Balance? That sounded like corporate jargon to him. He wanted to argue, to push back and prove his point, but he realized he was treading dangerous ground. Instead, he forced a tight-lipped smile and muttered a half-hearted thanks before sinking back into his seat. The tension in the room lingered for a few seconds before Marcus smoothly transitioned to another topic. By the time the meeting ended, most employees were buzzing with excitement about the changes Marcus promised to bring. They filed out of the auditorium chatting animatedly, eager to share their thoughts with colleagues, but Ryan wasn't among them. He stayed rooted to his seat long after the room emptied, staring blankly at the now empty stage. His mind raced with conflicting emotions: anger, shame, frustration, and fear. How had he let himself get into this mess? More importantly, what was going to happen next? Lisa eventually came back to check on him. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. You okay? She asked softly, her voice tinged with concern. Ryan sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. Do I look okay? No, Lisa admitted. You look stressed. Maybe you should apologize to him. Clear the air. Apologize? Ryan snapped, his voice rising slightly. For what? Asking a legitimate question? It's not just about the question, Lisa countered gently. It's about how you're coming across. People notice. Stuff like that, Ryan. You don't want to make things worse. Ryan clenched his jaw, refusing to respond. Apologizing wasn't something he did easily, or often. To him, it felt like admitting weakness, like giving in to forces beyond his control. And besides, why should he grovel to someone who hadn't even confronted him directly yet? As Lisa walked away, leaving Ryan alone with his thoughts, he couldn't help but wonder if she was right. Was he digging himself deeper into a hole he wouldn't be able to climb out of? The weight of uncertainty pressed down on him, heavier than ever. Back in his cubicle later that evening, Ryan stared at his computer screen without really seeing it. Emails piled up unread, deadlines loomed ominously, but none of it mattered. All he could think about was Marcus Johnson, and the sinking feeling that his career at Innovatech Solutions might already be circling the drain. Little did Ryan know, the hardest part was yet to come. Marcus hadn't forgotten their earlier interaction, nor had he overlooked Ryan's pointed question during the town hall meeting. Behind closed doors, decisions were being made, decisions that would soon force Ryan to confront the consequences of his actions in ways he never anticipated. The next morning, Ryan Carter walked into the office feeling like he was walking to his own execution. He had barely slept the night before, tossing and turning as scenarios played out in his mind, each one worse than the last. Would Marcus Johnson call him out publicly? Would he be fired outright? Or would he simply be ignored, left to rot in awkward silence until he quit on his own? When Ryan arrived at his desk, he found an email waiting for him. It was short and direct. Please report to CEO Marcus Johnson's office at 10 a.m. There was no explanation, no hint of what the meeting might entail. Just those few words that sent Ryan's heart racing. For the next 2 hours, Ryan tried, and failed, to focus on his work. His hands trembled as he typed, and his thoughts kept drifting back to the email. What did Marcus want? Was this his chance to explain himself? Or was it the beginning of the end? At exactly 10 a.m., Ryan stood outside Marcus's office, staring at the closed door. He hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath before knocking softly. A voice from inside called out, "Come in." Ryan pushed the door open and stepped inside. The office was impressive, a large space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city skyline. A sleek desk dominated the room, and shelves lined with books and awards stood against one wall. Marcus sat behind the desk, looking every bit the powerful CEO he was. "Ryan," Marcus said, gesturing to a chair across from him. "Have a seat." Ryan obeyed, perching stiffly on the edge of the chair. His palms were sweaty, and he wiped them discreetly on his pants. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Ryan with an unreadable expression. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched on, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, Marcus broke it. "I wanted to talk to you about what happened yesterday," he began, his tone calm but firm. Both outside the reception area and during the town hall meeting. Ryan swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. "Look, I didn't mean any disrespect," he stammered. "It was just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Marcus repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You assumed I didn't belong here based solely on my appearance. Then during the Q&A session, you challenged my priorities in front of the entire company. Does that sound like a misunderstanding to you?" Ryan felt his face flush. "I wasn't trying to insult anyone," he insisted. "I was just voicing an opinion." "And opinions are important," Marcus agreed. "But they need to be expressed respectfully. Your behavior yesterday crossed a line, Ryan. Not only was it unprofessional, but it also created a hostile environment for others." I didn't create anything, Ryan snapped, his temper flaring. This isn't about respect or professionalism. It's about political correctness gone mad. People should be judged on their merits, not their skin color. Marcus sighed, leaning forward slightly. That's where you're wrong, he said evenly. Respect isn't about politics. It's about treating everyone equally, regardless of who they are. When you make assumptions based on someone's race, you're perpetuating stereotypes that harm us all. Ryan opened his mouth to argue but stopped himself. Something in Marcus's tone made him pause. Not anger or aggression, but genuine disappointment. For the first time, Ryan realized that his actions weren't just affecting him, they were impacting the people around him too. Marcus continued, I'm giving you a choice, Ryan. You can either issue a public apology and commit to undergoing sensitivity training, or we can terminate your employment immediately. The decision is yours. Ryan stared at him, stunned. Public apology? He echoed. You're asking me to grovel in front of everyone? It's not about groveling, Marcus corrected. It's about accountability. If you're serious about learning from this experience, then owning up to your mistakes is the first step. Ryan clenched his fists, struggling to keep his emotions in check. Part of him wanted to storm out of the office and never look back, but another part, the part that valued his job and reputation, knew he couldn't afford to throw everything away. What happens if I refuse? Ryan asked, through gritted teeth. Then you'll be escorted out of the building, Marcus replied matter-of-factly. Your behavior has already violated our code of conduct. Continuing down this path will only make things worse for you and for the company. Ryan slumped back in his chair, defeated. He knew Marcus wasn't bluffing. This wasn't just about punishing him. It was about setting an example for the rest of the company. And as much as Ryan hated to admit it, Marcus was right. He'd crossed a line. Fine, Ryan muttered reluctantly. I'll do it. The apology and the training. Marcus nodded, a hint of satisfaction flickering across his face. Good. We'll schedule the training sessions later this week. As for the apology, I'll send out a company-wide email summarizing the situation. You'll address everyone tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow afternoon. The words hit Ryan like a punch to the gut. He had less than 24 hours to prepare himself for what promised to be the most humiliating moment of his career. As Ryan left Marcus's office, he felt numb. The weight of his decision pressed down on him, heavier than ever. He returned to his desk, avoiding eye contact with his coworkers as he passed by. Some of them glanced curiously at him, whispering behind their hands, but Ryan ignored them. He couldn't deal with their judgment. Not now. Lisa approached him cautiously, her expression sympathetic. How did it go? She asked quietly. Ryan shrugged, unwilling to share details. Let's just say I'm not getting off easy. Lisa frowned but didn't press further. Instead, she offered a small piece of advice. Just try to see this as an opportunity to grow. Everyone makes mistakes, Ryan. What matters is how you handle them. Ryan wanted to argue, to tell her she didn't understand. But deep down, he knew she was right. This wasn't just about saving his job, it was about proving to himself, and to everyone else, that he could change. That evening, Ryan went home early, unable to concentrate on anything else. He spent hours rehearsing what he would say the next day, practicing phrases in front of the mirror until they sounded sincere. It wasn't easy, admitting fault never was, but Ryan knew he had no other choice. By the time he finally fell asleep, exhaustion had overtaken him. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, all Ryan could do was hope that he wouldn't lose everything he'd worked so hard to build. Little did he know, the hardest test was still ahead. Public apologies were rarely forgiving, especially when pride was involved. And as dawn broke over the city skyline, Ryan braced himself for the storm that awaited him. The next afternoon, the auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Employees filed in earlier than usual, curious about the announcement Marcus had teased in his email. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some speculated layoffs were coming, while others guessed it was about recent changes in company policy. No one expected what was about to unfold. Ryan Carter arrived late, deliberately stalling outside the building until the last possible moment. He adjusted his tie nervously, his hands trembling as he pushed open the door. Every step toward the auditorium felt heavier than the last. When he finally entered, the room fell silent for a split second before resuming its low murmur. Heads turned to watch him take his seat near the back, trying and failing to blend into the crowd. Marcus took the stage promptly at 3 p.m., calm and composed as always. He began by thanking everyone for their dedication to Innovatech Solutions and briefly recapped the goals he'd outlined during the previous meeting. Then, without hesitation, he addressed the incident involving Ryan. Recently, we encountered a situation that highlights why our values of respect and inclusivity are so important, Marcus said, his voice steady but firm. One of our engineers, Ryan Carter, made inappropriate comments based on assumptions about someone's identity. This behavior is unacceptable in any workplace, let alone one striving to foster mutual respect. The room erupted into murmurs. People glanced at Ryan, who sat frozen in his chair, his face pale. Lisa, seated nearby, shot him a sympathetic look, but most others avoided eye contact altogether. Some whispered behind cupped hands, while others simply stared, waiting to see how this would play out. Marcus continued, I gave Ryan a choice: apologize publicly and commit to sensitivity training or face termination. He chose to apologize, which I believe shows a willingness to learn and grow. Let's hear from him now. As Marcus gestured toward Ryan, the room grew eerily quiet. All eyes turned to Ryan, who slowly rose to his feet. His legs felt like jelly, and his throat was dry, but he forced himself to walk to the front of the room. Standing under the bright lights with dozens of pairs of eyes fixed on him, Ryan felt exposed and vulnerable. He cleared his throat, gripping the sides of the podium tightly. Hi everyone, he began, his voice shaky. First, I want to say I'm sorry for what happened yesterday and for anything I've said or done that made anyone feel uncomfortable. It wasn't my intention. His voice trailed off as he noticed skeptical expressions in the audience. Someone coughed loudly, breaking the tension momentarily. Ryan swallowed hard and tried again. I realize now that my actions weren't just wrong, they were harmful. Making assumptions about people based on how they look isn't fair, and it doesn't reflect the kind of person I want to be. I'm committed to doing better and learning from this experience. There was a long pause after he finished speaking. The silence was deafening. Ryan glanced at Marcus, hoping for some sign of approval, or at least acknowledgement, but Marcus remained impassive, watching him intently. Just as Marcus prepared to step forward and wrap up the meeting, Ryan's frustration boiled over. But come on, he blurted out, throwing his hands in the air. This whole thing feels unfair. I didn't mean any harm. Why does one mistake have to define me? The room erupted into gasps and murmurs. Employees exchanged shocked looks, unsure of how to react. Marcus stepped closer to the podium, his expression stern. Ryan, he said firmly, cutting through the noise. Intentions don't erase impact. Your words and actions affected real people, including me. Accountability isn't about punishment. It's about recognizing your role in creating a positive environment for everyone. Ryan clenched his fists, his face turning red with anger. So you're just going to crucify me for one bad day? Is that fair? What about giving people a second chance? This is your second chance, Marcus replied, his tone unwavering. You can choose to accept responsibility and move forward, or you can continue down this path and prove my decision. Correct. The ball is in your court. Ryan opened his mouth to argue further, but stopped himself. He could see the resolve in Marcus's eyes, the kind that wouldn't budge no matter what Ryan said. Defeated, he muttered something unintelligible and stormed out of the auditorium, leaving behind a stunned audience. After Ryan's abrupt exit, Marcus addressed the group once more. Thank you all for being here today. Moments like these aren't easy, but they're necessary if we want to build a culture of accountability and respect. Let's use this as an opportunity to reflect on our own actions and ensure Innovatech remains a place where everyone feels valued. The meeting ended shortly afterward, and employees filed out of the auditorium, buzzing with conversation. Some expressed sympathy for Ryan, believing he deserved another chance. Others agreed with Marcus, feeling that such behavior couldn't be tolerated in a professional setting. Lisa lingered near the stage, her arms crossed as she watched Marcus pack up his notes. "That must have been tough," she said softly when he noticed her standing there. "It was," Marcus admitted, sighing heavily. "But sometimes tough decisions are the right ones. If we don't address issues like this head-on, nothing will change." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think he'll actually follow through with the training?" "I hope so," Marcus replied. "For his sake and for the company's, but ultimately it's up to him." Meanwhile, Ryan paced furiously outside the building, muttering to himself. He felt humiliated, angry, and betrayed, not just by Marcus, but by the entire situation. How had things spiraled so far out of control? One careless comment, one stupid assumption, and now his reputation was in shambles. As he walked home later that evening, Ryan replayed the events of the past few days in his mind. He couldn't deny that he'd messed up, but accepting full responsibility still felt impossible. Instead, he convinced himself that Marcus was making an example out of him, using his mistake to scare others into compliance. Over the following weeks, Ryan attended sensitivity training sessions reluctantly, often rolling his eyes at the exercises and barely participating in discussions. His attitude didn't go unnoticed by his trainers, who reported back to HR. Meanwhile, word of his firing spread quickly within the industry, making it difficult for Ryan to find new employment. Each rejection letter added fuel to his growing resentment. At Innovatech, however, life moved on. Under Marcus's leadership, the company implemented new diversity initiatives and fostered a more inclusive work environment. Employees felt empowered to speak up about issues that mattered to them, knowing their voices would be heard. Even Lisa found herself taking on a leadership role in organizing community outreach programs, inspired by Marcus's vision for the future. As for Ryan, his struggles became a cautionary tale, a reminder that words and actions carry weight whether intended or not. And though he refused to admit it even to himself, the experience left a lasting mark on him, one that would shape his perspective long after the dust had settled. Little did Ryan know his journey was far from over. Change rarely comes easily, especially when pride stands in the way. But somewhere deep inside, buried beneath layers of denial and defensiveness, a seed of self-awareness had been planted. Whether it would grow remained to be seen. Months passed since the incident with Ryan Carter, and life at Innovatech Solutions had transformed dramatically under Marcus Johnson's leadership. The company was buzzing with energy. New projects were launched, diversity initiatives flourished, and employee morale soared to levels no one had seen before. People felt valued and respected, knowing that their contributions mattered regardless of who they were or where they came from. Marcus spent much of his time overseeing these changes, ensuring that every decision aligned with his vision for an inclusive and innovative workplace. He held regular town hall meetings, encouraging open dialogue between employees and management. These sessions became safe spaces for people to share ideas, voice concerns, and celebrate successes together. Slowly but surely, the culture of fear and judgment that once lingered in the shadows began to fade. Lisa Reynolds, Ryan's former co-worker, emerged as one of Marcus's strongest allies during this transformation. Inspired by his commitment to inclusivity, she took charge of organizing community outreach programs aimed at mentoring underrepresented groups in tech. Her efforts earned her recognition not only within the company, but also in the broader industry. For Lisa, it was a chance to make a difference, a role she never imagined herself stepping into but grew to love deeply. Meanwhile, Ryan Carter struggled to rebuild his life after being let go from Innovatech. Word of his firing spread quickly through professional networks, making it nearly impossible for him to find another job in the tech sector. Potential employers hesitated when they heard about his reputation, wary of hiring someone whose behavior might disrupt team dynamics. Frustrated and desperate, Ryan eventually settled for a lower-level position at a smaller firm, a far cry from the prestigious role he once held. At first, Ryan tried to convince himself that the situation wasn't so bad. The new job paid less, but at least it gave him some stability. However, it didn't take long for reality to set in. His coworkers avoided him, sensing his bitterness and resistance to change. When the company introduced mandatory diversity workshops, Ryan rolled his eyes and complained loudly, earning the ire of his supervisors. It seemed like everywhere he went, his past mistakes followed him, casting a shadow over everything he did. One evening, after yet another grueling day at work, Ryan sat alone in his apartment staring blankly at the wall. A stack of rejection letters lay scattered on his coffee table, each one a painful reminder of how far he'd fallen. He replayed the events leading up to his dismissal over and over again in his mind, searching for answers, or maybe excuses, but nothing made sense anymore. For the first time, Ryan allowed himself to consider the possibility that he might have been wrong. Not just about Marcus or Innovatech, but about his entire worldview. Had his assumptions about people blinded him to their potential? Was his insistence on merit really just a mask for prejudice? These questions haunted him, gnawing at the edges of his conscience until he couldn't ignore them any longer. Determined to understand what had gone wrong, Ryan decided to revisit the sensitivity training materials he'd dismissed months earlier. At first, he approached them reluctantly, expecting to find the same cliches and corporate jargon he'd mocked before. But as he read through the content, something shifted inside him. The stories of discrimination and microaggression struck a chord, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about his own actions. He remembered the look on Marcus's face during their confrontation, the disappointment, the quiet authority. For the first time, Ryan realized that Marcus hadn't been trying to humiliate him. He'd been giving him a chance to grow, and Ryan had squandered it. Feeling a mix of shame and determination, Ryan reached out to Lisa, hoping she might offer some guidance. To his surprise, she agreed to meet him for coffee. Over steaming cups of espresso, Ryan poured out his frustrations and regrets, admitting how lost he felt without his old career. "I messed up," he confessed, his voice heavy with emotion. "I was arrogant and ignorant, and I hurt people because of it. I don't know if I can fix things now, but I want to try." Lisa listened patiently, nodding occasionally. When Ryan finished speaking, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's never too late to change," she said gently. "But you have to mean it, not just for yourself, but for others too. Start small. Show people you're serious about growing." Ryan nodded, gratitude washing over him. For the first time in months, he felt a glimmer of hope. Change wouldn't come overnight, but he was ready to put in the work. Back at Innovatech, Marcus stood by the window in his office, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The city skyline shimmered in the fading light, a reminder of how far the company and its people had come. As he reflected on the journey, he thought about Ryan. While their paths had diverged, Marcus hoped that Ryan would find his way back to a better version of himself. "Respect isn't given," Marcus murmured to himself. "It's earned, and sometimes it takes losing everything to truly understand that." In the weeks and months that followed, Ryan began taking steps toward redemption. He volunteered at local nonprofits, mentoring young students interested in STEM fields. He attended workshops and seminars, soaking up knowledge he'd ignored for years. Slowly but surely, he started rebuilding his reputation, not as the brilliant but difficult engineer, but as someone willing to learn and grow. Though Ryan's name was rarely mentioned at Innovatech anymore, his story served as a powerful lesson for everyone who worked there. Mistakes could happen, yes, but accountability and growth were what defined a person in the end. As Marcus wrapped up another successful quarter, he couldn't help but smile. The road ahead was still long, filled with challenges and opportunities alike. But with a foundation built on respect and inclusivity, Innovatech was poised to thrive, not just as a company, but as a community. And somewhere out there, Ryan Carter was finding his footing again, proving that even the hardest lessons could lead to meaningful change.